Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Welcome back to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. Our guest today is a certified financial planner and partner with Edge Financial Advisors. James Alexander, thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background and what made you want to become a certified financial planner. What was your backstory? What is your origin story? Why do you have a passion for this industry?
Sure thing. Yes. So if I can take a trip down memory lane for your question on my background. Yes, I live into the Chicagoland area, and I originally wanted to be a math professor, believe it or not. And I love numbers and how they all fit in together. I play a lot of chess. I used to teach chess to several individuals I see, and I said, I want to be a math teacher. And so I went to Loyola University, downtown Chicago, to do that. And I quickly realized if I didn't enjoy being a math teacher, there's really not a lot of fallback options. And so I said, I'm going to give this finance thing a shot. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And the way I see financial planning, financial advising, why I bring up math and more specifically chess is, money is a numbers game. In chess, I attribute a lot of the chess strategies to financial planning. What pieces of our financial life can we move around to solve what we want to solve for our life, to leave, that legacy, to provide that peace of mind for ourselves? And so I absolutely fell in love with it. Fast forward, I graduated. I started working at a company called Scottrade that many of you listening may have known from the past. They were the $7 trades and had the helicopter commercials and whatnot. Well, I started interning there right before our housing market crisis. And so I saw quite a bit. I saw a lot of different people losing their shirt, self-directing their assets. And that indirectly allowed me to take this path I have for the last 15, 17 years to vouch to myself, people I work with, I do not ever want to have them make the mistakes they made with their money, not just from an investment standpoint, but from a planning standpoint, so that they can have peace with this money, because I believe it's fuel to accomplish what we want to accomplish in life, whatever that might look like.
That makes sense. That is a great background story. And we all cringe when we think about the housing market crisis. That was something we all lived through and remember very vividly. And so I love that inspired kind of your vision and your mission that you're on. Talk to us a little bit more specifically about Edge Financial Advisors. What made you want to be part of that company and so involved in the process of that company?
Yeah, no, great question. I appreciate the ask. So when I was at Scottrade and then they were acquired by TD Ameritrade, I worked my way up the corporate ladder there. We had a service at those brokerage firms where we would refer out to advisors who were certified financial planners and well-versed that could help in a much deeper way than I was able to initially. And what I was able to learn from that experience was we had a list of probably 25 advisory companies that my clients that I worked with that in a consultative manner could use. And when I sat down with a lot of these firms, I really listened. I had the benefit of being a third-party observer. I listened which advisors really gravitated towards their clients and clients loved, and which were too numbers-based. And that sounds a little counterintuitive given how much I love numbers. But I share that because why I landed on where I'm at today is the founder of our company, who's now my partner. He had just a phenomenal way to show his care for clients, humanize this financial game, and how deep he went into planning, how much he understood the landscape of our world. Furthermore, we're an independent RIA, registered investment advisory firm. So we have open architecture. We don't have rules of the road or commission-based products. We can be a true fiduciary for our clients with, that independent landscape. And so him and I got along very well, and I landed here in early 2019 and been able to grow the client base ever since. We've had COVID since then. We've had an inflation scare. Now we've got, concerns about the economy at this stage. There's never such thing as a dull moment, and that keeps it exciting. But, within the company, what we offer are the 5 pillars of planning, which are investments, estate, insurance, tax, and retirement planning, let alone legacy. So that's what we cover for our clients. We wanted them to view us as a one-stop shop in addition to a family feel, because again, we're humans. This is a conversation between two individuals, and that's it.
That's something that certainly Stan and I know the majority of our listeners can really relate to as well, is wanting to have that, not only that kind of face-to-face friend relationship, but also that holistic view of planning, making sure that clients really do have all of these different pillars and pieces in place so that all of this planning and all the work that they're doing actually goes the way they want it to. So I absolutely love that. My next question for you is, and you mentioned him a minute ago, your partner, Ed Meek, you guys have a podcast. So tell us a little bit about Ed's Edge. I love the name. Tell us about the Ed's Edge podcast. What audience is that podcast for, and what could our listeners expect from listening to the podcast?
Yes, yeah, say that title 5 times fast.
Yeah,
That'll be
yeah.
a tongue twister, right? So we started the podcast in 2020 when we kind of stumbled upon a couple of branding messages, but we started it because it was tough having in-person conversations with our clients. And so the original intent, which is still today, is to educate them around rule changes, educate them around certain strategies, tell stories about clients, humanize it, all of that. And so how it's evolved over time is him and I are just two guys having a conversation, sharing some hot topics that may be on everyone's mind, but also have them realize that we're all in this together and we're going to solve for our problems and provide our solutions together. And so what people can expect are 20, 25 minutes of a conversation between two gentlemen. We sometimes will have guests ourselves talking about, charitable giving, have an expert on that and whatnot. And so we try to target specific topics that are top of mind for people. And I'll use one main caveat on that education, which is so huge for us, is we want to provide that education with things that can't just be Googled, because that's easy to do. So we share deeper stories and feelings and motivations and passions about certain things that a computer can't do. And so anyways, we probably have 50 or so episodes by now with certain topics, and we love it.
That's cool. I like that it is a show, and you say on your website, it's really geared for, your average person. You don't have to, there's not a lot of jargon. You don't have to be an expert. That's not who this is geared toward. It is really geared towards, your average Jane and Joe investor out trying to get good information on how to do it. I love it. And I also love the caveat that it's not stuff you can Google. These days, we're all pretty tech savvy. So I like that it's a little bit more in depth. Stan, I've stolen all of the questions from James so far. So I will be quiet for a minute, I promise. And I know that you have several as well.
Yeah, no worries, I really do. So James, I noticed that, and you'd mentioned this earlier in this conversation, you've positioned yourself as a fiduciary. And I know that not every financial advisor does that. I know financial advisors that have gone out of their way to not position themselves as fiduciary. So I really have a couple of questions relating to that. One is, how does positioning yourself as a fiduciary impact your mindset about the work you do with clients? And my second question drills deeper into that to ask, how does being a fiduciary impact what you do and how you do it for clients?
Yeah, well, such a wonderful, and yes, to your point, deep question. I appreciate the ask. So first and foremost, being a fiduciary, the best analogy I'll use as a high level starting off, this allows me to sit on the same side of the table as my client and talk to them about their needs, wants, and wishes with no agenda other than to position myself as a problem solver. If they buy a certain investment, sell a certain investment, get a certain product, don't get a certain product, there is no incentive for me to push them any other way than what's in their best interest, because that's the definition of a fiduciary. We are legally obligated to provide solutions that's in their best interest. And so I'm very open about that with my clients, because when I sign on clients, I'm fortunate to have them sign on with me. I tell them, the goal is to get married. And that's a weird thing for someone to hear, but we're not dating. This isn't a transaction. And so people that say, I want you to beat the stock market by 5%, they go to a hedge fund, more power to you. But that's not me. I'm someone that wants to provide that peace of mind, help you thrive financially through sound investing and sound planning. And I go back to that chess, which is why I'm so fortunate. There's a lot of correlation there. Is my job is to move different pieces of the puzzle based on what I'm hearing my clients say to solve for their needs and win their financial game. And that's another thing I'm passionate about. Is so many people say, well, my neighbor has $2 million or $5 million or what have you. I should have that too. Maybe not. What are you trying to do? What type of, situation are you in? What do you have for for yourself? And so as a fiduciary, I can look at the entire landscape, and I require that of my clients, because I also tell them, as a fiduciary, you go to the doctor and you say, my arm hurts. If he gives you an answer in 5 minutes, you should probably get out of that room. He needs to know a lot about you in order to solve deeply. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I stay in that inquire mode a tremendous amount of time. So I have a deep, deep understanding of my clients to know, does a charitable remainder trust make sense? Does a long-term care policy make sense? How do we minimize taxes and convert to Roth IRAs because of your taxes for the next 5 years are much lower than we project them to be, right? All these different pieces to the puzzle. I want them to see me as their financial quarterback and not just their money manager. And that's probably the biggest difference in the shift we're trying to make at our firm. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does. Do you think clients appreciate that distinction, the fiduciary dimension of the relationship?
I do. I think I'm very pleased to report in my world, which I know is small relative to the big financial world, but the awareness is becoming better and better about the different types of advisors. In fact, 3 months ago, we did a podcast about the different types of advisors and what they do and don't do and what may make sense for someone. And so I think especially now that, people experience COVID, there was a big shift in mindset, especially in baby boomers, of time. I thought I had a lot of time. Maybe I don't, right? I want to maximize the time I'm here on earth. And how do I do that? I have this fuel of money and all these strategies that I don't know anything about because I wasn't taught this in school, but I need someone who knows me that can help solve for that, as opposed to someone who just specializes in one certain thing. And those are very important because, again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know every intricate detail of trust. I know how they work, and then we segue accordingly. But I want them to lean on me to provide that financial peace of mind and reach every single goal that they have. And I challenge them to dream bigger. I can't tell you how many times I've told people, spend your money. Coming from a financial advisor, spend your money, because you can't take it with you. And so those are good conversations to have.
So I'm curious. I'm guessing you're having some really interesting conversations now because we've gone through a period of, I guess, what I would characterize as unusual levels of volatility.
Yes.
And I've got to believe that this is a time when the relationship your client has with you becomes really important. In fact, I don't even have to ask that question. I know it is actually. But I'm curious to hear how you're navigating this question now. And we're having this conversation in very early in May of 2025 when we don't really know. I mean, I guess we've never ultimately really known which way the market's going, right? I mean, there are always surprises that emerge, but it seems like right now there are all these factors at play, and the market could go up substantially fairly quickly, or it could go down substantially fairly quickly. Talk to us about the conversations you're having with clients about how to think about that, how to manage that.
Yes, yes. That's where I say this facetiously, but also seriously, is I turn into a therapist. a financial therapist. That's my job right now. And so clients will ask me and say, what's going on? There's so much uncertainty right now, and I don't know what to do, and this is going to happen and all of that. And we're spiraling, right? And a lot of that has to do with news headlines and what they're geared for, which is to drive fear, which is to create certain, clicks and all of that. But aside from that, I need to separate it as that therapist into two factors. One is the emotions of this all, and two is the logic and the math, right? And so we can't jump to logic. I tell them I cannot jump to logic without understanding why are they feeling that way, right? So as an example, a common concern is, the stock market's dropping. I need to live on this money. It's not going to last, right? And so that's the natural conclusion is I'm losing money and this is not good. Well, that's when I step back to our financial plan that we originally created. And I talked to him about, remember we talked about this and all of that. And so I say, okay, so you're concerned about the stock exposure you have dropping. Yes. Let's pretend that happens. In fact, let's pretend we have another Great Depression. And nobody likes hearing me say that, right? But I do this by design. Okay, so we have another Great Depression, your stocks get cut in 50%, 70%, right? We set up this plan to create this income stream with your non-stock money that will last you 8 years, 12 years. Do you think the market will rebound within 8 to 12 years from now? If the answer is no, from their point of view, we have to have a different conversation. If the answer is yes, hopefully that provides some peace as a starting point. Because we're not touching the stock money. When we manage our clients' money and they live on their income, when the market's down, we're touching fixed assets, bond money, CDs, money markets, et cetera, things of that nature. And so it helps us be tactical with them. But people forget that because they see this money going down and it's a natural tendency. It's going to go away at some point. And so, I have to understand where they're coming from, empathize with that. Yes, it's tough. I know. This is the price of admission for long-term growth. But when you zoom out over 10 years in history, there's a 98.9% chance of the market being positive over a 10-year period of time. I like those odds. I like those odds. And if Armageddon happens, we're all in it together. So money under the mattress won't work either. So anyways, that's my typical way of helping people through that. It's tough.
Yeah, I've had to explain to my wife that if you take a look at the visual graphic of market performance over the last 80 years or so, the S&P is up like 3/4 of the time or more than that even, right? So it's like, but when you're in the downdraft, you don't remember that, and it's pretty scary.
It reminds me one thing to your point that I think is very powerful because I fell in love with the psychology of all this is losing 10% feels 3 times worse to the average human being than that same positive feeling of gaining 10%.
Yeah.
And so we are extra sensitive to losses, generally speaking, than we are to the same equivalent gain. And I think that's important to recognize as an advisor, as someone that helps people with their money.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true for me, actually. When I see my account value go down, it's much more painful than the celebration event that I have whenever that feels good, right? But losing is more painful than the satisfaction of the upside for sure.
Yeah.
That's true. Before we run out of time, and I'm loving the conversation we're currently having, I think it's something, whether we're in this industry or other industries or just a casual investor, this little snippet of wisdom is something we all have needed to hear. But you touched earlier on the fact that you're a big believer in encouraging your clients to pass along financial gifts sooner rather than later, or spending that sooner rather than later. That's a big thing for you. So tell our listeners a little bit about your viewpoint on that and what caused you to kind of have that viewpoint and give that advice to all of your clients.
Sure thing. I'll be as concise as possible with this, but I'll start off with an aha moment I had when I read the novel, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yep.
One of the chapters in there was beginning with the end in mind. And one of the
Yep.
stories within that chapter was picture yourself at your own funeral, which again, I'm going morbid here, but picture yourself at your own funeral. What do you want those loved ones around you to say about you? And if you reframe that question internally to yourself, often it's not about mom left me with $3 million. Like, yes, that's nice. But the memories we had, the ability when tough times had for me, they were there for me, right? All of those stories that typically is what people want to leave their legacy as, and the education as well. And so I bring that up because a lot of clients will tell me, well, I want to make sure I don't run out and anything left over I want to provide to my children. Common answer I receive. Well, here's the problem potentially with that is when you pass away, often you're in your 80s or your 90s. How old are your children? They're in their 50s and their 60s. They're probably more financially stable in their 50s and their 60s than they are when they're in their 20s and their 30s. And if you ask someone who's 25 years old, would you rather have $10,000 today or $50,000 when you're 55? Assuming that individual is responsible and is a good steward of their money, most people would rather have $10,000 when they're 25 trying to save up for a down payment for their house than when they've already pretty secure. And so the impact you can make earlier on when you're 65, despite the concerns you have about your retirement, as opposed to just whatever's left over, is massive. So there's that mathematical part of it and feeling part of it, but also you get to see them enjoy it. You help them with the house, or college savings, right? How many grandkids they're front loading 529 plans for them? And they're able to support because how many parents right now are stressed about college, right? And how to save for that. And so that impact, there's so many things there. And so the reason people don't do it is the fear of running out, which is my job to help them overcome. But if there is less and less of that fear, it's amazing the impact you can make for others while you're alive and help them in the time of need.
There's so much wisdom in that, and I love that. And you would appreciate this, James. That is my parents' viewpoint on things. My parents are secure, and they very much, especially when we were younger and newly married and little kids and all of that stuff, they wanted to help pay for the vacations we couldn't have afforded and go on the trips with us while they're young enough to enjoy it with us and all of those things. They really, and they were the first people I really knew that kind of took that viewpoint, but they really wanted us to, whether it was helping out with a car or a college fund or camp or whatever it was, they wanted to take their money and get to watch us and then eventually our children enjoy it. They want to see the pictures from the trip. They want to be there at the dance recital. And so I love that you really encourage your clients to do that. It's been such a positive experience for my parents. And then obviously for my husband and me and our kids, especially when, you're young and hungry and you have kids at home. And it was a blessing, a double blessing, both for them and then, obviously for us as well and for our kids. So I think that's just such a great bit of wisdom. And I wanted to make sure our listeners got to hear that from you because I don't think financial planners really talk about that enough. Stan, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think it's pretty common to see professionals, of all varieties, but financial professionals for sure, get into the silo of it's about the money and really fail to focus on the meaning of the money, the potential good the money can do, the potential harm the money can do if it's not transitioned properly. I think there's a huge underestimation of the potential danger of wealth. I also think that people underestimate the power of it to do good in the world too. And so James, one of our missions, mine and Katie Beth's, is to give voice to those things, both of those things, and that's really true now that we know that there's but depending on who's doing the calculation, 80 or 100 or 120 trillion dollars is going to pass hands over the next several years. Something that's like an avalanche, a tidal wave that's never really happened in the history of mankind before, and to have that much wealth transitioning out of the hands of the people who, by and large, earned the money into the hands of people who didn't earn it. There's no sociological study that shows what the impact of that could be, either good or bad. And I think to have financial advisors expand the conversation to talk about the meaning, the impact of wealth, not just how to create more of it, and how to create financial security for ourselves, for our clients, is a really critical conversation. And I think it's one that our clients want to hear from us, because it turns out that while they do care about their money and they do care about having their own financial security, they actually really do care about the next generations as well. And they want to see those people loved, protected, and empowered to live their best lives.
Couldn't agree more. So I could not agree more. I mean, that's so well said. I guess I'll end on this note with a quick story that's very close to home for me. Is I had a client who was a massive saver. That was his money mind. He just wanted to save for a rainy day. And, you know, that he never could turn back on the faucet and live off that money because he was ingrained for 40 years to do this. Well, he passed away, unfortunately, 2 years ago. And his wife now inherited about $5 million. It was their joint money, but now it's just hers, right? So everything moved to her name. And she's in her late 70s. She's never going to spend all this money. She was a frugal individual herself anyways. Well, she has 3 children who never came from much. And we had this conversation about enjoying our money. And I got all 4 people in a room together, and we talked about, what do we want to do with this? How do we want to provide? And so we put insurance policies in place, not just for the kids, but for the grandkids, and set them up in all these areas. And right now they're in Aruba together, and they sent me a picture, and I said, I will I will smile the day that you ask me for a $25,000 check. I want to give that to you to enjoy. And now they're so grateful they did. And that's why I do what I do, is just, the impact that they can have from the dollars on the screen. So yes, I couldn't agree more.
That actually is the perfect lead in, and you may have just answered this, but that's the perfect lead in to the last question that I had for you, which is, through the work that you do and the impact you're having on your clients' lives, what is it you hope your legacy will be?
Oh God,
it's a tough question. Yes. It's the hardest one we ask.
Yes. So so think about my legacy, which I hope is many, many years down the road before I'm no longer here on earth, being 37 years old, is I have a 5-year-old son right now, soon to be 6. I want to, and of course my wife, between the two of them, my wife and I want to educate my son around, good behaviors, bad behaviors, all sorts of habits. I want to equip him to make the best educated decisions for himself. And mind you, he's 5 years old. That's pretty hard right now. But as he gets older, and I can provide him what he needs, primarily through educational support within the chapter that he wants to take for himself. And then within my career, I just want to impact as many lives as those that want to work with me. Impact in a way that allows them to accomplish, I cannot stress this enough, what they want to accomplish. And I feel like so many people, we have this keeping up with the Joneses, herd mentalities. I'm supposed to do this by this time. I need to get married. I need to retire. I want to understand what they want to accomplish and allow them to play their own financial game at peace. That's just very, very rewarding to me. And so I'm grateful for what I do.
That's a fantastic answer for a difficult question that I put you on the spot with. So excellent answer. I appreciate that. So for all of our listeners, we certainly appreciate you. This has been the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. And our guest today was James Alexander. And to get connected with James, you can visit edgefa.com and find his About Me page that has all of his contact information. We'll also link that for you in the show notes. James, thank you so much for jumping on and taking time out of your day to be with us. We really appreciate all of the wisdom that you imparted to us today.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.